So the tool that I give you is based on an instrument called the MBTI. The MBTI stands for the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. So it's a type indicator, it's not a test. You know, in psychology they do a lot of psychometric tests, and a test is to reveal, to help you reveal, to help you understand who you are. In other words, you may have different aspects of your intelligence or different aspects of your personality, and a test will tell you you are like this, you are like that. In this case, it's not a test, it's a questionnaire, okay, that allows you to identify what we call your primary mode of operation. Now, what do we mean by your preference or your primary mode of operation? I'm going to ask you to cross your arms. Cross your arms. Good morning. So cross your arms. Now uncross and recross the other way. So how does it feel? It feels bizarre, okay? It feels strange. Now, can you do it? Yes, you can do it. But if I say, okay, let's go back to, let's continue the course, then you will invariably go back to the original situation. Change, right? Change is always uncomfortable, and the minute it's over, you go right back to the old scenario. So what we mean by your preference or your primary mode of operation is what you do spontaneously. Spontaneously, I cross my arm this way. I don't think about it. It's just a reflex. It's not that I can't do the other, but it doesn't come naturally. Now, the theory behind the MBTI says we don't know why we are born the way we are born. We're just born this way. Okay, so there's no reason to explain. There's no point in explaining why you are an extrovert or an introvert, or why you have this tendency or that tendency. It's just the way it is. What will make you an emotionally mature and able to deal with all kinds of situations is your ability to do both. In other words, the ability to cross your arms this way, but also to do it the other way. Let me give you another example. I would like you to write your name with the other hand. So if you're right-handed, write it with the left hand, and if you're left-handed, write it with the right hand. So, again, how does it feel? It feels frustrating. Can you do it? Yes, you can do it. What is the result? Okay, the result is definitely much worse than what you used to, okay? So it's not that you can't do it, it's just that it's going to take longer. The result is not going to be as good, and it's going to be very frustrating. So it's also a good metaphor of change. When we go through a significant change and we step out of our comfort zone, in other words, when we don't use our primary mode of operation, it is frustrating, it's going to take longer. Yes, we can practice. By the way, let's imagine that your arm is in a cast. You broke your arm and it's in a cast, and you are forced to use with the other hand. If you stay this way for a few months, clearly you're going to improve your ability to write with the other hand. So it's very important that you understand that who you are, what your primary tendency is your strength. That's what we need you for. At the same time, we all have the potential of becoming a victim of our own mode of operation. In other words, if you do too much of something, then you will be a victim of that. It's a little bit like speaking two languages. Right now we're speaking English, okay? We have that language in common. But let's assume that we get into a fight, or that we are in a conflict. Chances are you're going to become angry in Turkish, and I'm going to become angry in French. So while we were able to speak English when everything was fine, when there is a conflict, then we'll polarize in the different direction. And with this tool, it highlights the same kind of danger. In other words, most of the time I get along with everybody and I don't have a problem, but when we are outside of our comfort zone, when we go through the curve, we're the bottom of the curve, when we are stressed, when we are going through a significant change on one of the 4 dimensions, chances are you're going to go more on this way and I'm going to go more on that way. And that's why we have conflicts. And if we happen to derail, if we happen to polarize on the same dimension, of course we're really going to be in conflict. So yesterday we talked a lot about resistance. When you feel that somebody's resistant, you get frustrated, you get angry, you get upset, and chances are you will continue to be more of what you are, but then the person becomes also rigid and continues to be more of what they are. So it's quite important that we understand that flexibility is the rule of the game, but before you can be flexible, you also need to understand, the difference between these 4 dimensions. So I was coaching at some point somebody who was a banker, and he definitely wore this kind of shoes. And he was invited to do a presentation in a board of directors in a company in Finland. So he felt very prestigious, I'm a lawyer and I'm going to do this presentation and I'm going to be very impressive. Except that when he arrived in Finland, the first thing that they asked him to do was to remove his shoes and to wear slippers. I mean, they were probably not pink, but he had to wear slippers. And he lost his entire composure. It's like, how can I make a presentation in slippers? But apparently in Finland, I don't know if it's true for all the country in Finland, but in that particular company, when people arrived, probably because of the weather and there's too much snow and all that, people remove their shoes and they want to be comfortable and they wear slippers. So it's only about shoes, but just to show you what happens when you're being asked to step out of your comfort zone and how much do you how much do you stay on track and you keep your composure, when something changes. So if we say, well, all these people should work together, all these people come from different ministries, and we should all embrace the notion of strategic management, we realize that it's a little bit more complicated because whether we like it or not, we have quite a lot of prejudice and a lot of preconceived ideas about people simply about shoes. So we're going to talk about 4 preferences. The first one is how we interact with other people. The second difference is about how we handle information, how we look at reality. The third dimension is how we make decisions. And finally, how we organize ourselves and other people. So I'll explain one dimension at a time. So the first dimension is how we interact with other people. We have the potential of, on one hand of the spectrum, to be an introvert, and on the other hand, to be an extrovert. So on the questionnaire, we ask you to pick between these 2 options, and you had to decide, are you an introvert or are you an extrovert? Now, the misconception is that extroverts are very sociable people and they like to laugh and they like to be in the middle of the center of attention, and introverts are not sociable. It's not true. We're talking about, according to the MBTI, how you recharge your batteries. In other words, how, when you are in a situation that is difficult, when you're outside of your comfort zone, what do you do to cope with the situation? So extroverts tend to talk a lot to people because it's by talking that they can clarify their thoughts. And so they like the notion of brainstorming. They like the notion of saying, well, I don't agree with you, and I expect you to tell me that you don't agree with me. And they are very good in playing ping pong in terms of discussing topics, okay? Because it's by talking that they will become more and more clear about their own thoughts. So they need the interaction of other people. And they recharge their batteries by doing that. So when they are in a conflict, they have a difficult situation, they need to talk with their friends, and they need to be reinforced in this mode of operation. Introverts function absolutely differently. In other words, they need to be left alone. If I'm outside of my comfort zone, I'm in a stressful situation, I need to step back and to reflect and to think and to really absorb the situation before I can react. So it's a totally different way of operating. It's not good or bad, it's just very different. And as a trainer, it's clearly easier to do training with extroverts because they tend to have opinions and they talk and they contribute, and it tends to be much more alive. I remember doing a session with a group of biostatisticians from Belgium who were definitely introverts, and I was looking at them, and there was this blank kind of look. So I would say, "Do you agree?" And they would say, "Yes." And I say, "Well, how do I, give me some feedback. How do I know that you agree?" And the person say, "Well, if I didn't agree, I would tell you." We tend to think about Americans as being very superficial because it's a very extroverted culture. And in order to be a politician, I'll show you some pictures later, in order to be a politician in the US, you have to, do this kind of thing and be very, very explicit and very clear and very sociable. And, Bush was a very good American in that sense, and he was very popular because of that. One of the reasons they resent Obama is also because he's more of an introvert and he's not doing that game. So we also come from cultures that have a tendency. And according to the questionnaire, which by the way has been tested in 40 different languages over millions of cases, it doesn't matter which culture you come from or which country you come from, there are more or less an equal number of all the different types. So in other words, you are closer to a Japanese person or a Belgian person or a Russian person who has the same profile as you do than you are from somebody from your family or your neighborhood or your culture, but who has the opposite profile. Because a Russian with the same profile functions like you do, while somebody in your family who has a different profile definitely does not function like you do. Okay, so what's the difference between an introvert and an extrovert? The introvert tends to put a sign on the door saying, "Do not disturb, I need peace, I need quiet, I need to concentrate, don't interfere with my concentration." And often when people walk in the office and they don't knock on the door and they say, "Well, what do you think? I want to talk to you about something," they perceive it as an interruption, they perceive it as an aggression, as something that they tend to be very reactive towards.
Sorry.
I once did training for the Bank of Austria. And the Bank of Austria, the Austrians tend to be more introverted and very, structured people. And the Bank of Austria was bought out by Unicredit Banca, which is the Bank of Italy. And Italy is an extroverted culture, so clearly there was a major misalignment between the two cultures with a lot of tension. And we actually did a session with the Austrians and the Italians, and I did the MBTI. So we asked the people to situate themselves, and all the Austrians were on one side and all the Italians were on the other side, which was really interesting. Now, when you listen to the Austrians, they say, "Well, I sent an email to my colleague in Italy and he doesn't respond. So I send another email and he doesn't respond. And I'm tired after 3 emails or 4 emails. I become quite judgmental because I say, look at those Italians, how typical, and they're not polite, they don't respond, and I can never work with these people." So there was a lot of judgment and preconceived ideas from the Austrians to the Italians. If you spoke to the Italians, extroverted people, they say, "We're not working with somebody who's sending me an email. He never picked up the phone to introduce himself. When I went to Vienna, they never even invited me for lunch, and I never had coffee with this person. There's no way I can do business with somebody if I don't have a personal connection." So it's only when they started talking to each other, they could also understand each other's point of view and stop being so judgmental. Because there was a lot of value for the Austrians to work with Italians who could bring a different style and a different type of interaction with customers. And there was also a lot of values from the Italian to understand the Austrians. So we are very complementary, but we're also very judgmental. By the way, you're often married to the opposite. Many of us marry the opposite of what we are, and then we get divorced exactly for the same reason, because there is some attraction for people who are not like us, but then when we have to deal with somebody who are not like us, we become judgmental and we resent them because they do not function at all the same way. If I'm an extrovert and I love to go on vacation and meet a lot of friends and have a lot of family members around me, and I enjoy that very much, and my husband is an introvert who wants to be alone in the woods and read and not talk to anybody, we don't have the same definition of a vacation. So I'm not saying that you should divorce your spouse. I'm just saying we need to negotiate again how to spend time and how much interaction you need to have. So introverts tend to be focused on themselves. I mean, it's not in the sense of being selfish, but they really need to gather their thoughts and really go back in their own mind in order to be able to be productive, while extroverts, it's kind of the opposite movement. So introverts definitely prefer written communication. They send more emails. They, they send a lot of letters. They don't necessarily pick up the phone. The purpose of this exercise is also to say, if I'm in a conflict with somebody and I'm frustrated, for example, the Austrians who are sending 2 emails, 3 emails. If you send 3 emails to somebody and you don't get an answer, your alarm should go off and you should say, maybe I need to proceed differently. In other words, what I'm doing doesn't work. Remember, we are very good at reproducing the same efforts, hoping for different results. So if after 3 emails you don't get an answer, maybe it's time to pick up the phone or to go and visit the person and shake their hands and have a conversation. I'm always amazed about how in organizations, and it's probably true in your ministry, how many people live on the 2nd floor or work on the 2nd floor and never once went to visit the 3rd floor. Or they work in this little department and they never once went to visit another department. So it's really important that you step out of your geographical environment and your silo, and once in a while you go and introduce yourself to people who work in the same ministry, who might be concerned about strategic management as much as you are, but you don't know if you don't interact with them. Now in politics, these are pictures of what I think are introvert politicians. Sorry, some of them are French. I don't know anything about Turkish politics, so but clearly, as opposed to, I'll show you extrovert politics, okay? Bush was definitely an extrovert, Berlusconi, Sarkozy, Reagan, Lula, Chavez. What was interesting, in America, there's a lot of pressure to be extrovert. So I'm not sure that Hillary Clinton is an extrovert, but she had to play that game, which then made her look quite bizarre. And same thing for McCain, who was running against who was he running against? Obama. He was also trying to be, to be an extrovert. He hired Sarah Palin, who totally overshadowed him. And I think that's one of the reasons he lost, is because she was so extroverted that she was the star of the show and totally overshadowed him. And when he tried to do the extrovert thing, it really looked bizarre. So we all have a potential for derailment. What do I mean by derailment? It means that we have the potential to become a victim of our own mode of operation, and particularly when we are under stress. When you are in a panic zone, you are outside of your comfort zone, you're going through a major change. Some of us will become too introverted. So if you're too introverted, it becomes very difficult to know what you think, very difficult to read. You tend to isolate. You tend to think too much before you make a decision or before you do anything. And you tend to obsess about the same thing because you don't talk to anybody. So you resass the same ideas over and over again. And the sense is, I can do it alone. I don't need anybody. I'm very afraid to be dependent on anybody. Now, most of the time we're not like this, but when you are under pressure outside of your comfort zone, if we put you in the middle of China and you don't know the language, you don't know how to deal with the situation, if you are an introvert, you may have the danger of falling into that category. Now, what would be the opposite? What would be the danger of being too much of an extrovert? Extrovert, they want to be the center of attention, okay? So they tend to jump into action too quickly. They are easily distracted, like the rabbit in the tail. They tend to become too available, they talk to too many people, they socialize too much, so they forget to come back after the break, or they forget to finish their work. They often don't evaluate risks or consequences because they act too quickly. And they tend to take on too much responsibility because it's quicker and faster to do it yourself. So they need to be informed, to be connected, they don't want to be ignored.